Show me the money.
Don't show me love, show me those dollars. Don't show me love, show me those dollars.
Coin, cabbage, cash. We all want it. Our political parties are now rolling in it.
Show me the money. Show me the money.
Kia ora, I'm Amanda Gillies on The Detail today. Cold hard cash in politics.
Well, 6 political parties that made it into Parliament at last year's election raised a record-breaking $25 million in donation.
Who is splashing it about and to whom?
There was one big donor who's brand new. We've never heard of him before.
And is it time our rules around political donations get an overhaul? It's just been revealed that our political parties recorded a big jump in donations last year. As a group, the 6 parties, that's everyone bar Te Pāti Māori, received almost $25 million. That's the biggest total declared in history and almost 3 times more than the number declared in 2017. RNZ journalist Farah Hancock investigated why.
Yeah, it was a massive jump. I mean, if you look at a chart of it, you can see all the parties, except for Te Pāti Māori, had this massively above any previous year. And it was a little bit perplexing to begin with. But when I dug into the figures, I realised there was a couple of big things that changed. One was a reporting change. So for the first time, parties had to declare the amount of donations and the total value that they received under $1,500. Now, before, they never had to declare this. It was kind of like dark money. We didn't know what it was or how much they had, and we were always kind of guessing. And everyone was saying, you know, when they'd see National do so much better than Labour, they'd say, oh, yeah, but Labour gets lots of little donations, so it's actually, you know, a pretty level playing field. But what the new reporting showed that everybody, it seems to be getting a lot in those small donations, as well as Labour, but there's still a massive inequality between the parties. So they all showed much more money, but National is still miles ahead. I think of the 10 million National got in 2023, 4 million was from little donations. Labour got like 4-point-something million total, and about 2.6 was from those little donations.
Why did they change the rules?
I think just to make it more transparent. I mean, there's concern about the level of public trust in our political election system with donations. And it was a bit of a baffling loophole that they'd never made these transparent, because anonymous donations the amount had to be declared, but the non-anonymous ones didn't. So it was a very, very weird loophole that they just seemed to tidy up. And it's given us a much better view of the money that really is going to parties.
Parties must now name any donor who gives $5,000 or more. It used to be you could stay under the radar for anything up to 15 grand. So does this encourage or discourage the opening of wallets?
It doesn't seem to have discouraged anyone from donating. There was a lot of donations and lots of really, really big donations this time around. So there were, I think, around 26 donations of over $100,000 in the 2023 election year, and previous to that it was maybe 2 or 7 in the 2 previous election years. So people are still donating and donating large. They're not put off by having to have their name shown.
And who are the names? Who are giving these big donations?
Yeah, that's been really interesting. So there was one big donor who's brand new. We've never heard of him before, Warren Lewis. He has a sheet metal company, I believe, and he gave $500,000 to National. I think he was reported as saying he liked what Christopher Luxon was doing. So that was one that came out of the blue that nobody expected.
Give it up for Christopher Luxon, ladies and gentlemen.
And then there's a couple of other new ones that have sort of entered the scene with large declarable donations, which is Graham Hart and the Rank Group. And in the last 2022, 2023, between the two of them, the Rank Group he's a director of, that's about $800,000 has been donated, sort of National Act, New Zealand First, so those parties on the right of the political spectrum. You've got also Nicholas Mowbray, the Mowbray family, who's, you know, topped MBR's list of wealthy people this year. They gave, in the past 2 years, they've given maybe $200,000 or $300,000 to, again, parties on the right. Then there's the ones who give quite regularly. So you've got Trevor Farmer, Christopher and Banks, which is a company. Jenny Gibbs always gives to ACT. And for the left, you have Philip Mills. He's from the Les Mills gym chain, he always gives quite a lot. And Robert Smalley, who's a retired judge, he always donates to Labour. So there's some new faces and some old familiar faces who've just been giving quite a lot over the year.
Do they give just to the right or just to the left, or do some give to both sides of the political spectrum?
Now, this has been a change, and I think a lot's changed recently. So this recent change is they all seem to give to one side of the political spectrum. So Philip Mills gives to Labour and the Greens. We're talking about Jenny Gibbs, ACT, Graham Hart, it's all to the right. I just couldn't find any single donor, and I went through all of them, who gave to parties on both sides of the spectrum. And this is quite different to, say, in the 90s or even early 2000s, when you get companies, say Westpac, I think was one, there's a few others, Lion Breweries, who would give equal amounts to every major party, and that they would say their donation is aiding democracy. So now I talked to an academic, Matt Grashbrook, who's looked at donations a lot, and he said, yeah, they still try and say that they're trying to aid democracy when they donate, but they're only donating to one side of the spectrum, not to the other. So it's a little bit of a hollow, it's just aiding democracy. If they really wanted to help democracy, they'd be giving to both sides.
Do some of them hope or think that they're perhaps buying sort of political influence?
If you ask them outright, they'll also absolutely not. But again, and this is a study Max Rashbrook did, he talked to sort of 8 wealthy donors, and what they told him was that they got to meet ministers. So while they don't think they're buying influence, they do tend to get better access if they make big donations.
They're sort of buying time, I guess.
Yeah, they are. And, it's interesting that $100,000 a donation might get you a bit of time, where someone who can only donate $20 probably wouldn't get that same time.
New rules around declaring donations have caught a few donors unaware, meaning they donated to a party without even realising it.
It was an interesting one. What I did is I looked at donations that came in after the coalition was formed, because I thought most donations people give in an election year to help a party campaign. So who's giving after? And I know, parties have money all the time. And when I looked at the ones who'd given, Business New Zealand was one. So I got in contact and said, why did you decide to give after the coalition was formed? And they were like, oh, no, I think you've got your details wrong. Your sources are incorrect. It's like, well, actually, this is a return published on the Electoral Commission website. So.
I'm not making this up.
No. And they said, well, it was a ticket to a fundraising event. And we go to fundraising events, for all political parties. We quite regularly buy tickets. And they didn't realise that the purchase of that ticket at that price, New Zealand First would go, actually, it's above the cost of the event. So we're classifying that as a donation.
Interestingly, that same event, there was a former Labour minister who donated.
Well, it's the same thing. So Clayton Cosgrove was a Labour MP. He's got a lobbying firm, and I understand it's, again, a dinner, and lobbying firms will go to dinners for all political parties. It just so happened that this one was timed after the coalition was formed.
So, effectively, that was Labour and Business New Zealand donating to the coalition government. Sadly for Labour, they received no donations from New Zealand Business, not 1 cent. Meanwhile, National enjoyed 51 donations, totalling more than $1.2 million, and ACT attracted nearly $500,000.
The rest of the parties, I think all of them got at least something from businesses, even the Greens did.
Why is that, do you think?
So chatting to Max Rashbrook and chatting to a few other people, the consensus is business sort of, they weren't very happy with some of the lockdowns and I think it was called the Fortress New Zealand mentality, and so they were keen for a change. So they tended to put their money behind parties on the right, with the exception, I think there were 2 companies who donated to the Greens, but mostly business money went to ACT, National and New Zealand First.
Gosh, that's brutal. How do you think Labour recovers from something like that to get that sort of trust back?
Well, I think we should be asking whether businesses should be donating to politics at all. Again, New Zealand is a bit of an outlier in allowing businesses and organisations to donate. And people, there is a recommendation from a review panel to stop this happening. So I think we need to ask that question. And then on the flip side, the argument always is that Labor gets a lot of donations from unions, and I think it got maybe 300,000 or so from unions. So unions tend to donate to Labor and I think to the Greens very slightly one, but they never donate to the parties on the right.
By the looks, the business dollar is worth a lot more than that of unions. In 2023, the total donations for National Act and New Zealand First, the coalition government, was double the combined amount that Labour, Te Pāti Māori and the Greens got. That could explain why, like the Greens, Labour has turned to its own MPs to cough up the cash.
This again was brand new. We always knew about the Greens, a sort of tithing arrangement where they give a percentage. And it was the lowering of that declarable threshold from 15,000 to 5,000. We suddenly saw all these Labor MPs' names there. And it was quite a lot of money. I think it was about 600,000 all up in total that was given from the various, because there's quite a few MPs in there. So I think if you go right back in election data, you can see it back in the maybe late 90s. There was some going on and then it just seemed to disappear. So I don't know why it seemed to disappear and it's come back now. But yeah, they're definitely giving.
So what was the biggest one-off payment by a political party member to their own party?
So that was from John Tamihere to Te Pāti Māori. So it was $50,000. That was the biggest.
Not bad. Is there a cap on how much you can donate to a political party?
There's not, and this is part of a concern that people have about the New Zealand electoral system, is that you can give an unlimited amount. Like, if I had the money, I could give $10 million to a party, and there's nothing to stop me doing that. Parties do have a spending cap during election time, but there's nothing to stop me donating that much. Lots of countries don't let that happen. So we're a little bit of an outlier to allow unlimited donations to happen.
An independent electoral review panel recently looked at our electoral system, in part because of rules like that.
So they looked at not just the donation system, or the party financing system, but our entire system. And they came out in November with a document, which I think was released in January. It had 140 recommendations in it, and it was based on 7,500 submissions from all across the board, political parties, people like you and me, everybody.
Yep.
And they do have a section on public, on the financing of political parties. Now, they've made some really big recommendations. One is to limit the amount that a single person can donate to $30,000 over 3 years, at a 3-year electoral cycle per party. So I could, if I was going to donate, I could donate to, say, 3 different parties, $30,000 over that 3-year cycle, but that would be the limit I could spend.
That's actually a higher limit than, say, Canada or Ireland, where donations are restricted to $2,000 and $4,400, respectively.
They've also recommended no businesses and no organisations. So this would stop that donation splitting thing going on. They've also suggested, to make up for a little bit of the money that the parties won't be getting because the donation cap's lowered, is to give all parties a base funding and to give people tax credits, because at the moment, donations to political parties, you can't claim tax back on them like you could to a charity. So they're saying, we'll allow a tax credit for donations up to $1,000. So they're really trying to encourage lots of small donations to come in rather than those really big donations. Now, that was released in January, and in the press release, Paul Goldsmith he didn't adopt any of the recommendations straight away. He immediately just ruled out a couple of them.
Bet.
Which was there was one for allowing people age 16 to vote. And he said, that's not going to happen, not going to happen. And then he said, well, in due course, we'll come back with formal reaction to the recommendations. And that hasn't happened to date.
When do we expect that to happen?
I have no idea. Now, this review panel has reviewed things before, and its recommendations have been ignored. And to be honest, I think it would be a hard sell to have. I'd be interested to see what happens, but I'm not expecting to see change soon, even though this paper, it really did hammer home that there's a low level of trust in the donation system. It really is a problem, and we probably should do something to improve it if we want to get that trust in our democracy back.
It would be hard to see, though, with Paul Goldsmith, with his party getting so many business donations and big one-off donations, wanting to embrace and adopt those new recommendations.
Absolutely, but at the same time, we can see with this new reporting thing that they're still getting lots of those little $1,500 and under donations. So, yeah, sure, they would lose some money, but they're actually getting lots of little ones. So it's those big donations aren't essential.
Talking to political parties, how open or transparent are they talking about donations now? Because obviously, just in recent times, you had people pulled up on not being transparent with their donations.
They're actually pretty good. They disclose what they need to the Electoral Commission, and I've had to go back and clarify things. And the response, they get back to me the same day when I go, hey, is this actually correct? It's a really minor, boring detail, and someone will come back and go, yes, that's blah, blah, blah. So they're actually pretty good in doing what they need to do based on what the law is.
You spent a lot of time on this. It's the most, I really loved how detailed it was. Looking back now, what's your biggest takeaway from your piece?
I think, to me, it feels like we're at a bit of a turning point. I mean, we like to think in New Zealand that we've got this very open, transparent political system. Democracy's, very nice and clean and tidy. But I feel like there's some danger points in our donations system. So there's different sources where parties can and where money can be poured into campaigning. One is for the political parties. And one of the danger points there is allowing unlimited donations and businesses donate, which allows the donation splitting. Another source which we probably need to look at, which could be exploited if we cut down on donations, is third-party promoters. So I don't know whether third-party promoters are groups who at election time advertise political messages.
He calls people bottom feeders, wants to scrap fair pay agreements for bus drivers and cleaners. He'll make you pay for prescriptions. And he plans to give billions in tax cuts to landlords, which puts funding for schools and hospitals at risk.
They might not be saying vote for this party, but they might be going, everything's shit, we need a change. Excuse my language.
Read between the lines, yeah.
Yeah, so some of the third-party promoters that we might be aware of is Family First. There's groundswell. The trade unions are often third-party promoters, and we did see a lot of action last year from these third-party promoters. I mean, you might remember the Luxon Out of Touch campaign that the Council for Trade Unions do.
National leader Christopher Luxon is out of touch and focused on the wealthiest few. Luxon isn't the right leader in a cost of living crisis because he doesn't understand life for everyday Kiwis. Christopher Luxon, out of touch, too much risk.
Now, there's very few rules around third-party promoters. You can have as many. There's no limit on how many there can be. They do have a sort of spending cap that they can spend, and if they promote a certain party, then that spending counts towards the party's what they're allowed to spend campaigning. But attack ads don't come under that. So those Council for Trade Union ads, they didn't count towards Labour's spending or Green spending or anyone's spending. It's a free-for-all. So you could have 100 third-party promoters all running attack ads at one time. And the other thing about third-party promoters is there's no rules currently that they have to be clear about where their money comes from. So they don't have to declare, who's behind them. And that's been a really interesting thing for me this election. And then the one who spent the most is an organisation called, or the promoter was called Vote for Better. And they did these ads all on social media, YouTube, Facebook, and a lot of them were video ads with this really creepy kind of AI voiceover.
Today, over 51,000 patients in New Zealand are waiting more than 4 months to see a specialist. That's 3 out of every 10 patients. New Zealand can do better.
And I tried to find out who was behind this. It's a man called Tim Barry, but we know nothing about him. And I kept asking him questions, and he was very obtuse, didn't want to be interviewed. I asked where the money came from, and he said from New Zealanders up and down the country. Since the election, he's pulled down all the website, the social media, and I said, are you going to campaign again next election? And he said, I don't know, I'll keep my options open. Now, everything he's done is above board. There's nothing illegal he's done, but we have somebody pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into an election campaign, and we know nothing about who he is or where the money comes from, like nothing about him.
Feel like you've got less money in your pocket these days? That's because since 2017, taxes have increased more than wages. New Zealand can do better.
And it's all completely fine under the rules, absolutely fine. But I think for New Zealand to have a level of trust in our democracy, there probably needs to be a little bit more transparency going on.
Don't show me love, show me those dollars.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell and produced by Davina Zimmer and Gwen McClure. Thanks to Farah Hancock. I'm Amanda Gillies. Matua.